Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly has approved a proposal to hold the presidential elections before April 30th, 2018. Constituent Assembly member Diosdado Cabello, who put forth the proposal, asked the country's National Electoral Council to select a date for the electoral process. Speaking shortly after the announcement, President Nicolas Maduro said that he would serve as a candidate if chosen by social groups and the Venezuelan people.
The National Constituent Assembly calls for elections to be held during the first quarter of 2018 to choose a new president for Venezuela. What does this mean? That before April 30th, when the first quarter of the year comes to an end, elections have to be held in Venezuela to choose the president. Of course, it is the Electoral Council who has to choose the date for this process to comply with their mandate.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro congratulated the Venezuelan Constituent Assembly for proposing to hold the next presidential elections on April 2018 and called a new victory to continue with the revolutionary process.
I want to congratulate the National Assembly. It was a wise decision to hold the presidential elections before April 30th. It was the right decision because with the presidential election scenario, the imperialism and right-wing coalition are desperate. They were planning operations to sabotage our economy and destroy our people. So, I agree with this decision and I ask the electoral power to set the nearest date to hold the elections. We are going to obtain another victory and start building a new chapter in our revolution.
President Maduro has also announced that Jorge Rodriguez, the head of the Venezuelan Peace Talks Commission, will reschedule the peace talk meeting with the right-wing coalition in the Dominican Republic for January 28th and 29th. He said that the government commission will be the first one to arrive to the Dominican Republic, and they will sign a peace agreement with the Venezuelan opposition. We now go live to our correspondent in Caracas, Freddie Gillingham, to talk a bit more about today's news. Hello, Freddie. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Freddie. Are you hearing me?
So, yes, we have quite major news from Venezuela today. We can confirm that the National Constituent Assembly officially approved Diosdado Cabello's proposal to bring forward the presidential elections of 2018 before the end of April. Cabello, who is a leading member of the National Assembly, made the announcement at around noon today. It was met with much approval and applause. The next phase now is that this must go through to the CNE, where it must be officially confirmed, the logistics and for it to get a confirmed date. This will be the 25th election of the Bolivarian Revolution since it began in 1998. President Nicolas Maduro is rumored to be the main presidential candidate for the PSUV. He is running on a big, he is riding off a big set of popularity at the moment, following two last elections in 2017, where his party came out on top. However, the opposition are really on the back foot. News of this announcement today will not be met well in the opposition camp. They recently cancelled the dialogue that they had in Santo Domingo last week. Just to give you some of the reactions on social media, the opposition have come out in criticism of this. They have criticised it, however, they have yet to really give any plan or strategy of how they will contend in this big presidential vote. All eyes will be on the CNE for an official date to be confirmed. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Freddie Gillingham. That's our Freddie in Caracas. Other news now. Meanwhile, the supporters of Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva have gathered in Porto Alegre to back him ahead of a court ruling on Wednesday, which will decide whether he can run for president later this year. Thousands of protesters rallied outside the court, which will decide whether to uphold Lula's conviction last year for alleged corruption. His successor is President Dilma Rousseff, who was ousted in 2016 in what her Workers' Party calls a parliamentary coup, was also at the march to support her comrade. Our correspondent, Andre Vieira, has more from Porto Alegre.
What is the consequence of a coup? The coup was to destroy me, to destroy the PT.
So we're going to move on to another story. Actually, we have Andre on hold, so we're going to go to that story from Andre Vieira, and he's reporting from Porto Alegre.
We are following the demonstrations in defense of democracy that has reached a square close to Congress in Porto Alegre, where a group of women held an amazing rally to support this march that is also taking place in different cities in Brazil. The square was filled by women that came from different parts of Latin America, like Haiti, Argentina, Uruguay, and Venezuela, to denounce that a presidential election without Lula da Silva is a fraud. Dilma Rousseff will also take part in these events today, an important journey that will end with a political rally where Lula da Silva will also be present. Demonstrators are asking the court not to accept the sentence against the former president Lula da Silva, since there is no real evidence against them. We will keep you informed as the event unfolds.
Dilma Rousseff, who was ousted in 2016 in what her Workers' Party calls a parliamentary coup, was also at the march to support her comrade.
What is the consequence of a coup? The coup was to destroy me, to destroy the PT, but above all, to destroy our leader, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva.
Politicians protested in Honduras during Congress's first session as the governing party takes control of the parliament. Members of Congress from the ruling party were sworn in amidst shouts from members of the Freedom and Refoundation and the Innovation and Unity parties, chanting Juan Orlando Hernandez out. The country has been hit by a political crisis after the opposition denounced what they call electoral fraud in November's elections. They have also called for a boycott of Hernandez's inauguration on January 27th. The Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, has reversed his position on the Honduran elections and agreed to work with the Honduran President, Juan Orlando Hernandez, in December. In December, Almagro called for November's election to be held again. The Honduran opposition is continuing its week-long strike against electoral fraud, ahead of Hernandez being sworn in for another term on January 27th. They say they do not recognize the president's victory, but he insists he will take office.
On the issue of taking office, listen, it's going to happen on the 27th of January. Congress will have already started the process of being installed, and obviously we're going to wait for that day to also say who will be on the new team for the government and what the issues will be.
We have more news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Evo Morales, who's the president of Bolivia, has presented the two new ministers who will replace Reni Martinez and Remy Ferreira. Freddy Morales tells us more.
Two new ministers were presented by President Evo Morales. Alfredo Rada in the Ministry of the Presidency, replacing René Martínez, and Javier Zabaleta in the Ministry of Defense, replacing Raimi Ferreira. The president said that in both cases the replacements were made because of health issues. During the event, President Morales stated that this government is the best one that Bolivia has had in its whole history, because it belongs to the people. The 12th anniversary of the current administration took place yesterday, and Morales explained that the changes of the country can be seen even in protests. Yesterday there were small protest marches in Barrio Residencial de La Paz and in the city of Santa Cruz. Meanwhile, according to the government, 200,000 people from indigenous and social organizations marched in Plaza Murillo, praising the anniversary. Morales said that in the past were the poor who protested. Today are small rich groups who do it. He also denounced that this government has received mockery, threatening and lies from a right wing with no ideas. Bolivian government faces protests from the opposition, who are trying to prevent Morales from participating as a candidate in 2019's presidential elections.
Del año 2019.
We thank Freddie Morales for that report. Also, a new cabinet has been announced by Chile's president-elect, Sebastián Piñera. The future cabinet includes ministers who had served under his previous presidential term. Many of the chosen cabinet members support a free market economic model and business-friendly policies. For Chile, starkly contrasting with those of outgoing President Michel Bachelet. Piñera is set to be sworn in on March 11th. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Argentinian President Mauricio Macri held a joint news conference in Moscow. The Argentine president said that the two countries have shared interests, including within the military technical fields. Earlier on his Russia trip, Macri met with 18 Russian business CEOs looking to implement joint projects with Argentine partners. At the top of the agenda was the discussion of a nuclear power plant of Russian design on Argentine territory. Meanwhile, health workers have called for a 24-hour strike in several hospitals and clinics in Buenos Aires to reject the massive layoffs carried out by the government. The strike will affect the operations of 80 hospitals and clinics in the capital. Trade unions have condemned the dismissal of 122 workers from the Posadas National Hospital earlier this month and have said that these actions will greatly impact the operation of the health centers. And in Colombia, there's optimism as the negotiating teams from the ELN guerrillas and the government explore the possibility of restarting peace talks. Colombians are asking both sides to secure a ceasefire and ultimately peace.
Social movements and groups await the new beginning of the talks by the negotiation teams in Quito. Political analyst Victor Desirrea Lugo says the conversations will focus on establishing an agenda to overcome the crisis after the government left the peace talks in mid-January.
The main issues are first to overcome the obstacle and guarantee both teams can return to the talks. And the second is to begin work on a new ceasefire. The third is to reach an agreement on civilian participation, and the fourth to strengthen the topics already on the agenda.
In the midst of the discussion, there is a possibility of a new ceasefire agreement, but some citizens say both sides need to work first on regaining the lost trust.
They can reach a new bilateral ceasefire. We hope that it is prolonged, if not indefinite, and to also push the entire process. The peace process has a main axis, to guarantee the society's participation in what they've called a great national dialogue to overcome the causes of the armed conflict.
Another key topic will be the guarantees for the civilians. The Indigenous National Organization, ONIC, condemned the killing of 2 indigenous on Friday in the department of Arauca. They were extrajudicially executed by the military, who said they were ELN guerrilla members who died during combat. But the indigenous organization said they were hunting for food.
They went out with their traditional arrows to get food for their children and were returning at 10 p.m. They brought food for their animals in a bag and they were shot by the military.
With the murder of the 2 indigenous people, 9 children were orphaned. The indigenous organization demanded that the government investigates the facts and that guarantees that the crime will not be ignored.
Families of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa are calling for an independent investigation in the case. It's been 3 years since the students from the Raul Isidro Burgos School disappeared. There are theories that they were arrested and killed. The crime has shaken Mexico and the region. Their relatives continue to demand answers. They say there are facts that were not investigated, and they allege that there's a cover-up by the military and the government. And in Guatemala, Mayan families are suffering from the environmental impacts of a hydroelectric plant. It's been 2 years since the plant has been running in Vecapaz, north of Guatemala. Santiago Boton has more in the next report.
Mother Earth is dying. Maya Kekchi people attribute it to the flooding caused by the Roxa hydroelectric plant over the Ipule River in Alta Verapaz.
Our sacred trees, our vegetation and other lives are dying from the flooding. The water has also flooded fertile lands. We are very worried because we live at the shore of this river.
The flood started 2 years ago. The people affected say that this has also altered the natural course of the river. 3 waterfalls have also disappeared.
The river was black down there. Now it's deepened. Now you can't see anything else. Everything is flat.
The disappearance of the waterfalls stops the current from flowing and allows for pollution, one of the citizens says.
Previously, the current of the river was going there, but now it's going upstream, because down there the river is blocked. This is another problem this company has caused our community.
The Roxa hydroelectric plant generates 10.5 megawatts, according to some reports, and is linked to the International Energy Resources Capital Corporation.
Those who are causing this damage are not from here. We don't know them, and neither do we know which country they come from. We were born here, and this is our territory.
A few kilometers upstream, Guatemalan businessmen have also planned to build a second hydroelectric plant. The Roca Pontilla SA project's environmental study was halted by a judge because its approval was considered abnormal by the Ministry of Environment. Back to you.
The Select China Forum took place in Santiago, Chile from the 19th to the 22nd of January. And on the fringes of that meeting, CARICOM and China met to discuss how best they can work with each other to achieve mutual goals, particularly in the areas of regional transportation, renewable energy, and improved disaster management capability. And once again, Haitians have taken to the streets in Port-au-Prince to protest against Donald Trump's insulting comments. The demonstrators threw stones and lit fires after the police prevented them from marching past the U.S. Embassy. They also condemned President Trump's move to cancel the DACA program, which could affect 700,000 of young Haitian and Latin American immigrants.
This is a protest we have organized with the black and red flag to counter that statement from U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump ought to know that we helped the United States like in Savannah during the U.S. Revolution. We fought for their independence, and when they were in difficult times, we went to consolidate their independence. When Trump makes such a statement that confirms he doesn't even know his own country's history.
We have more news in a minute. Stay with us.
We face growing threats from revisionist powers as different as China and Russia are from each other.
Welcome back. Indigenous women and men from the National Indigenous Council of Mexico have traveled through 15 cities of the U.S. campaigning for independent presidential candidate Maria de Jesus Patricio, also known as Marie Chuy, who's herself Nuan Indigenous. Our correspondent Alana Duarte brings us more from Washington.
A journey through different cities of the U.S. ends here at the White House. Indigenous people have come looking to tell of the exclusion and divestment that affects Mexico and seek support from their northern neighbors.
There has been a traitorous attitude from the Mexican government supporting orders not only from the U.S., but all of capitalist and neoliberal brutal policies. They are taking away territories from the people.
Bettina is a Beniza indigenous woman, a native of Juchitán, Oaxaca, whose life has been put in danger. She's a member of the Indigenous Government Council, which supports the candidacy of Maria de Jesus Patricio, also known as Marie Chuy. This Nahua woman is trying to gather 900,000 signatures to start an anti-capitalism campaign. She'll be running in the election on the 1st of July, but they say that winning is not their goal.
We don't really want power. The power was built from the top by the economic elite linked to the United States. What we want is building something from below.
Francisco Grado says that reporting the complicity of their government with drug trafficking and transnational companies may put at risk the lives of the people who do it. On Sunday, members of their caravan traveling with the Nahua candidate were attacked.
2 cars with heavily armed people surrounded them and took cell phones, cameras, and all of the footage from the journalists.
For this indigenous Mayan woman forced to leave Guatemala and who settled in the United States, the role of the United States is crucial in order to understand the conflicts happening in different places.
Nobody's talking about the bottom line, not visible issues regarding what's happening to native peoples. Many live here in Washington. For example, there is a very big Mayan community which is basically invisible, mostly because of the U.S. policies.
At a meeting in which Native American people also took part, councillors remembered the principles of the National Indigenous Council, insisting that building a different world is possible.
Thousands of demonstrators have taken to the streets in Zurich, Geneva, and other Swiss cities. They are protesting against President Trump's planned visit to the World Economic Forum in Davos later this week. In Zurich, marchers headed to the city's financial district with banners and flares. In Davos, protesters managed to break through security to reach the Congress Center. U.S. President Trump is due there on Friday with the annual meeting of business and political leaders. And thousands of people have taken to the streets of Raqqa, Syria, to protest against a Turkish military offensive in the area, which began in the city of Afrin. Protesters held up signs and flags and chanted slogans against Turkey, calling its president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, a traitor. Turkey is in day 4 of its bombardment of suspected Kurdish settlements on the border towns of northern Syria.
Arabs and Kurds stand together in the face of terrorism. We are gathered today in the Naim roundabout to protest against Erdogan, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, and his aggressions in Afrin. We are all against Erdogan.
Now let's have a look at some of the other news from around the world.
The U.S. government partial shutdown has ended after Republicans backed the bill after accepting promises from the immigrants. The continuing resolution keeps the government funded until 8th February in the hope that Congress can reach a long-term budget agreement in the meantime. It is the 4th temporary measure since October. The 44th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum has begun in Davos, Switzerland, where billionaires world leaders and investors would discuss topics ranging from the global economy and sexual harassment to the risks and opportunities of artificial intelligence in the 4-day event. This year, theme of the forum is creating a shared future in a fractured world.
We need robust international cooperation if we are going to tackle shared problems. And that includes fighting corruption, improving the international trading system, tackling tax evasion, addressing climate change issues, and on and on.
A Japanese soldier has been killed after an avalanche presumably triggered by an erupting volcano engulfed a party of training soldiers on a ski resort in central Japan. A total of 11 other people were also injured, some when rocks from the volcano rained down on skiers at the mountain resort. Mount Kusatsu Shirane, 150 km northwest of Tokyo, erupted on Tuesday, but officials are still investigating whether it caused the avalanche.
As we still don't know what time and where the avalanche happened, we don't know the relationship between the eruption and the avalanche.
Residents of towns nearby the Mayon volcano in the Philippines are being evacuated from the area after warnings of an eruption. A giant mushroom-shaped cloud shot up from the Philippines' most active volcano on Monday, turning day into night as it rained ash on communities where tens of thousands have fled after warnings of an imminent eruption. Indonesia's capital of Jakarta was hit by a 6.4 magnitude earthquake, sparking panic and making people run in the streets for safety. Office workers rushed outside as buildings began swaying, where riders were thrown off their motorbikes by the force of the rumble.
Mexican filmmaker Guillermo del Toro's latest film, The Shape of Water, has received 13 nominations for the 2018 Academy Awards. The Mexican filmmaker received 2 Oscar nominations for Best Original Screenplay and Best Director. The Chilean film, A Fantastic Woman, has been nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film. It's directed by Sebastian Leleu and tells the story of a trans woman under suspicion for the death of her lover. And we've come to the end of this evening's news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.